Several years in the past, this function is sponsored by ACC Limited. Nani Palkhivala had a lifelong association with ACC, and he used the chairman's statement as a vehicle to communicate his views on the development of the economy. These statements reflect both his frustration at the control Raj and the continued failure of the government to realize the immense potential in this country, which free enterprise would have released, as also his never-ending optimism for its bright future. We are grateful to ACC for their generosity and continued support, and I would particularly welcome Mr. Harish Badami, CEO and MD, and Mr. R. Nan Kumar, Head Corporate Communications, who are present with us today. Incidentally, Mr. Nan Kumar has authored a small booklet titled Thus Spake Nani, which is a wonderful publication containing selected quotations from ACC's chairman's statements. This evening's function will be in two parts. In the first part, we will have the presentation of the Civil Liberties Award, and in the second part, we will have the memorial lecture. The Nani Palkhivala Award for the Protection and Preservation of Civil Liberties and Human Rights in India was instituted in 2006. It is given to individuals and institutions and carries an award of Rs 2.5 lakhs and a citation. Nominations for the award are adjudicated by a panel of 3 distinguished persons. The panel for this year, as was the case in the 3 previous years, comprised Justice Mrs. Sujata Manohar as the chairperson, Mr. Justice Sam Barucha, and Mrs. Sudha N. Murthy. We are grateful to these distinguished members of the panel for their continued efforts, and I would particularly like to thank Justice Mrs. Sujata Manohar, who has graced the occasion with her presence and has kindly agreed to speak briefly about this year's awards. I would request our Trustee Secretary, Shirin Barucha, to present flowers and a small memento to Justice Mrs. Sujata Manohar as a token of our appreciation. I would now like to request Justice Sujata Manohar to address the gathering and to present the awards after Shirin Barucha has read the citation.
Mr. Malakam, Ms. Barucha, ladies and gentlemen, as the chair of the panel of judges, it is my privilege and pleasant duty to announce the 10th Nani Palkhivala Award for Civil Liberties and Human Rights in the individual category and the 4th Nani Palkhivala Award in the organization category for the year 2016. And I would like to thank my fellow judges, Justice S.N. Variaba and Mrs. Sudha Murthy, for their help and guidance in choosing the award winners. These awards have been instituted in the memory of an outstanding jurist and a great human being, Nani Palkhivala. He used his legal skills and his commitment to human rights to promote the values of freedom, freedom of speech and expression, freedom of movement, freedom to practice any profession or business, freedom from oppression and arbitrary action. He was a champion of non-discrimination and equality before the law, and he fought many legal battles, which are now famous, for protection of individual rights and liberties, be it the liberty and rights of ordinary citizens or the rights of princes. To commemorate his work, these awards have been instituted to honor individuals and organizations that have displayed extraordinary initiative in preservation and defense of civil liberties of citizens, or to honor those who have done significant work for the preservation, protection, and defense of human rights in India. It is not easy to find extraordinary individuals or organizations who have displayed an extraordinary initiative in the protection and preservation of civil liberties and human rights. The trustees of the Nani Palkhivala Memorial Trust have very fairly broad-based these awards to cover work in all areas of human rights. This year, we did not have to struggle and weigh the work done by various individuals and organizations nominated for these awards. Today's award winners stood out from the rest by their extraordinary achievements. And we on the panel felt that if India can produce human beings of such extraordinary commitment to human values, if India can sustain, support, and value such unusual organizations committed to provide a life with dignity for the disabled and the underprivileged, then the country has nothing to fear. I am happy to announce that the 10th Nani Palkhivala Award in the individual category is given to Dr. Abhay Bang. Thank you for your support. He grew up in the Sevagram ashram of Mahatma Gandhi and was inspired by his ideas. A top scorer in the university who won 3 gold medals, he shunned lucrative practice as a doctor, and instead he qualified at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, and along with his wife, Dr. Nani Bang, he founded the Society for Education, Action and Research in Community Health, called CERT, in one of the most underdeveloped areas of Maharashtra, Gadchiroli. He and his wife have developed a village health care program which is now nationally and internationally famous. Living among villagers, they have developed programs that the local population needs. As doctors, they have dealt with gynecological problems of rural women, pneumonia in children, and care for the newborn in the village. This has made a major contribution to the reduction of child mortality in Maharashtra. Dr. Bang has also campaigned against alcohol and tobacco, and he has recently started a new youth initiative, Nirman, to sensitize young people to social problems. He has received several awards nationally and internationally, and he has shared his expertise with a number of organizations, government or private. For example, he chaired the expert committee on tribal health appointed by the Ministry of Health, Government of Maharashtra, and he's on various such advisory committees. And he also has the good fortune of being ably supported by his wife. Awards are not new to both of them, but I hope that this special award for human rights specifically acknowledges the valuable work that Dr. Abhay Bang has done. My congratulations to Dr. Abhay Bang. The organization category requires a sustained yet inspired work in the area of human rights. We have had an extraordinary family that has set up an extraordinary institution, again in Maharashtra, which has also won international acclaim. I am happy to announce MSS Anandvan for the 4th Nani Palkhivala Award in the organization category. Founded by Baba Amte, the great social worker and Magsaysay Award winner, Anandvan has attained new heights thanks to the dedicated work of Baba Amte's two sons, Dr. Vikas Amte and Dr. Prakash Amte, as well as their equally dedicated wives. Anandvan is not just a rehabilitation center where thousands of leprosy affected and other disabled people find a new life. It is a place which teaches them lessons of self-respect, self-help, and selfless service. Dr. Prakash Amte left medical career and moved to the forest region of Maharashtra to help Madhya tribals living in seclusion far away from civilization, and he succeeded in weaning the tribe from witch doctors and primitive rituals. Dr. Vikas Amte joined Anandvan in 1974 and has taken over the management of the institution. Physician by education, although he wanted to be an engineer, he says that he would like to work for both men and machines. Under his able guidance, Anandvan has set new standards in environmental protection, social reform, civil rights movement, health, and human rights. He has, for example, devised improved water conservation methodologies, practical farming techniques, better utilization of land resources, and so on. It is difficult to summarize the multiple achievements of this family and their Anandvan that has given the gift of happiness and joy to so many deprived people. Let me congratulate on behalf of all of us today's unusual and outstanding award winners, totally Indian in their vision and yet totally universal as well. Thank you.
The citation for Dr. Abhay Bam. The tribal and rural population which resides in the remote villages of our country are often most underprivileged communities of our nation, and in that process are denied an essential human right, namely access to basic health. It is left to a small number of dedicated citizens who devote their entire lives to cater to this essential need. Dr. Abhay Bang is one of this small band of Samaritans. Inspired by Mahatma Gandhi and brought up in Sevagram ashram, Dr. Bang, after a brilliant academic career where he obtained medical training in India and at the Johns Hopkins School of Public Health in the US, founded in 1985, along with his wife Dr. Rani, the Society for Education, Action and Research in Community Health, SEARCH, a voluntary organization which works with the people in 150 villages in Gadchiroli, one of the most underdeveloped districts in Maharashtra, to provide community-based health care to over 100,000 rural and tribal persons. Through SEARCH, Dr. Bang has developed a village health care program which has become a national and internationally recognized model and which has influenced healthcare policy in India and abroad. He has also created awareness of several important aspects of rural healthcare, including the largely hidden burden of gynecological diseases carried by rural women, the incidence of pneumonia in rural children, and the need for newborn care. In all these areas, he has provided innovative solutions. The home-based newborn care approach developed by him has been replicated in several countries and has become a national program of the Government of India, for which 800,000 community health workers are being trained under programs designed by his leadership. Dr. Bang's efforts in improving the conditions of the rural and tribal population has not been confined to the provision of health care. He has established Shodagram, a well-known community health care and research center in a tribal area. He and his wife have studied the problem of hidden child mortality in the state. They have also developed with the government of Maharashtra a plan to control the usage of alcohol and tobacco in Gadchiroli district and have started a new youth initiative called Nirman to sensitize and inspire the youth of Maharashtra to engage in the solution of social problems. Dr. Bang has been the recipient of many awards in recognition for his work. Both he and his wife have been awarded the Maharashtra Bhushan, the highest award of the Maharashtra government. In 2005, both of them were included in the list of global health heroes published by Time magazine. To these, the Nani Palkhivala Memorial Trust adds its own measure of recognition and salutes a citizen who, in an important area of human rights, has for over 30 years rendered selfless service to the rural and tribal population in one of the most underdeveloped areas of our country. Y.H. Malegam, Chairman, Mumbai, 4th February 2016.
Nani Palkhivala was a national luminary in the 70s when I was a medical student. 45 years later, to receive the Civil Liberties and Human Rights Award in his memory is a great honor, which I accept with gratitude and humility. I dedicate this honor to the people of Gadchiroli, to my colleagues in search, and to my closest colleague and wife, Rani, without whom this work wouldn't have been possible. Man is born naturally healthy, but everywhere we find him in the chains of sickness. Our mission is to liberate people from disease, to liberate people from the risk factors which cause disease, like ignorance, malnutrition, alcohol, tobacco, and finally, to liberate people from the dependence on doctors and hospitals, which itself can become a disability. The word for health, the Indian word for health, is far more meaningful than what WHO defines. The Sanskrit word is swastha. One who is stationed, one who is stable in himself. One who is dependent on others is aswastha. So the very definition described by swastha means people have to be capable of taking care of their own health. That's what our organization SURGE tries to do by empowering tribal people, rural people, women, youth to manage their own health, to be healthy. In other words, we call it Arogya Swaraj. We have got Swaraj, political Swaraj, but we need a health Swaraj as well. So the mission of SURGE is Arogya Swaraj. All our work in Gadchiroli, in Maharashtra, in India, has been to liberate people and to make them swastha. whether it is working with the tribal people to empower them, whether it is enabling rural women and 8 lakh ashas all over India to take care of 27 million newborn babies born every year, whether it is training youth in Maharashtra to take up various other social causes, in every sphere it is actually a search of Arogya Swaraj. But in the final analysis, one person who was liberated in this process was I, myself. Liberated from the race for success, for money, for position. Ultimately, all our efforts to liberate others are, in essence, a struggle to liberate ourselves from the chains of selfishness. I hope I succeeded, even though very marginally, very partially. And thank you for celebrating this small and partial success and honoring it with the great name of late Nani Palkhivala. Thank you very much.
Citation for Anandwan. Maharogi Seva Samiti, Varora, popularly known as Anandwan, Forest of Joy, was founded on 15th August 1949 by Murlidhar Devidas Amte, Baba Amte, the internationally known human rights activist and peace worker with a capital of just 14 rupees and 6 leprosy patients. Moved to the core by the unbearable suffering and miseries of leprosy-afflicted people, added to which was the social stigma and utter contempt from the healthy in society. Baba Amte devoted his whole life to the cause of leprosy, the poor, needy and the helpless. In this he was actively assisted by his wife Sadhana Tai, who helped establish an ashram named Shram Ashram Mitra Vasti on a 7-acre plot where everyone worked hard and the entire income and expenditure was pooled. In 1974, Baba Amte's son Vikas, after qualifying as a doctor, joined Anandwan and today manages the institution following the spirit of his father, but greatly widening the scope of its activities. Baba Amte's philosophy was that work builds, charity destroys, and that you can live without fingers but not without self-respect. He therefore conceived of Anandwan not as a rehabilitation center where thousands of lepers and other disabled persons find food and shelter, but as a school where lessons of self-help, self-respect and selfless service were learnt and emphasis was laid on cooperation and peaceful cooperative existence. Anandwan is therefore a self-made, self-sustaining model village, a miniature ideal India where unity and harmony, joy, love reign supreme. Today, after 68 years, Anandwan has 5 major sites spread over 300 kilometers in the 3 districts of Nagpur, Chandrapur and Gadchiroli in Maharashtra, housing more than 4,000 disabled persons who are engaged in about 49 different trades and disciplines as diverse as agriculture, agro-industries, industrial products, steel fabrication, handicrafts, leatherworks and electrical engineering. It runs colleges with 4 faculties which cater to about 2,500 students who are not disabled and 2 schools for 400 deaf, mute and blind children. Anandwan has grown into a flourishing village on land of about 250 acres donated by the government of Maharashtra, where through improved water conservation methodologies, improved practical farming techniques and improved utilization of land resources, a working ecosystem has been created. Anandban has also experimented with a number of innovative developments, including the construction of low-cost, low-maintenance homes where no steel or timber is used, and a plastic reuse unit where waste plastic and biodegradable materials are reused for production of hospital mattresses. Among the interesting initiatives taken by Anandban in recent years is the establishment in 2002 of a unique orchestra of a select group of inmates of Anandban consisting of leprosy-affected, visually or physically challenged, or hearing or speech-impaired persons, which has presented over 1,700 programs in Maharashtra. In 2006, Anandban stepped into the disaster district of Mulkwan, which was reeling under severe penury, disease, illiteracy, and a deluge of farmers' suicides. Through the establishment of a Center for Social and Environmental Action, provision has been made for basic medical aid, rejuvenation of impoverished farms and farmers, empowerment of a demoralized rural community, and restitution of a depleted and devastated environment. The Nani Palkhivala Memorial Trust applauds and recognizes Anandban for its many years of devoted service to members of the community affected by leprosy and other handicaps, and commends the example it has set in restoring their confidence and self-respect. Y.H. Maligam, Chairman, Mumbai, 4th February 2016.
Namaskar. At the very outset, let me tell you frankly that it's not Baba Amte and Sons Private Limited, because it carries the impression that all the family works there, but no. We dealt with almost 2.3 million people. It's not a small number. I'm born in 47. I'm used to saying, I open my eyes, I see my parents, or a leprosy patient walking from all parts of India. I wouldn't have thought that the award would be for the same purpose in 2016, but I'm glad to share the dais with my fellow traveler, Dr. Abhay Bang. We belong to the same alma mater. It's the first time that we are together on the same platform. Yes, sure. He has been receiving umpteen awards from all parts of the world. I won't say I've been refusing, but I was glad that when your trust decided to give the award to individual and also institution, I accept it on behalf of my leprosy patients and all the rejected of this society. Late jurist Nani Palkhivala has been associated with the cause of Anandban indirectly, though he was supporting our institution. Maybe he met my father some time ago, I am not sure. But Mr. late Shiavax S.R. Vakil, I was in correspondence with him, and I had few letters from jurist Nani Palkhivala. And in the true spirit, I accept that my father was a lawyer. You are also a lawyer. She was a justice. Yes, he was pleading the cause of the loneliest, the lowliest, the lost, the least, and the last. He has been a lawyer. But not only of leprosy, it covers the whole spectrum from cradle to coffin. He has three distinct movements. I'm chairman of all those three movements. And personally, it's a great cultural shock. I don't know who I am. I'm sure they're all topmost people of Mumbai. It's a great cultural shock for me because it's from woods to woodland. It so happened also a few years ago, in 1990, my father got the 7th Nobel Prize. That's known as Templeton Prize. Templeton was founder of Shares and Mutual Fund. I was required to travel to Westminster Abbey, Buckingham Palace and Guildhall for 3 days. It was $700,000 US. It was said about the Magsaysay Award is only $10,000, which is $700,000 US. And I have been receiving awards. My father is the only one on the planet to have received United Nations Human Rights Award for all challenged people in 1988. I couldn't get the passage from Nagpur to Delhi. Swati Kapadia arranged for the passage today, but I couldn't get passage in 1988 because there was no news in the Indian papers. And Indian Prime Minister, late Rajiv Gandhi, was waiting for me. I couldn't get the passage from Nagpur to Delhi. And after many, many years, I hear the word human rights. Yes, we have been espousing the cause of the lost people. And there was a time that we were looked down. The Amtes were the dreaded of the lot. You know Amtes because my father grew up with Gandhi. He started a Union of Scavengers. He began work in 1939. Gandhi called him Bhangiyon ka Badshah, which he adored more than any award in the life. Then he worked amongst leprosy patients. So for almost 25 years, we have never seen a relation or a schoolmate coming to our place. Why in the world you know Amtes? Now I'm on this side. Yes, it's a great difference. It takes a lot of time. And I'm on this side. Because we had a human quake and social tsunami, people from all parts of India coming there. And my father was a lawyer, so only weapons he had was hot water, potassium permanganate, boric powder, gentian violet. He was rightfully called a criminal, cruel, unscientific. I love my father. It was the first time in human history he made them work. And he said, let them lose their limbs but not their dignity. He was a wrestler. He was with Hutatma Rajguru. He had 1,000 Dandavaitak push-ups every day. So he asked them to demonstrate strength, never your weakness. You find hordes of people in Mumbai asking for arms. So he said, give them a chance, not charity. So he specially coined the word chancity. It did begin with 14 rupees. Now my institution has 160 crores worth budget of economic development. And my father got the Templeton Prize because he said, God is my patient. He doesn't walk, he doesn't talk, he doesn't see, he doesn't speak. He's my ideal patient. Because hordes of people coming from all parts of India, under social duress and social compulsions, they are there, not by choice. So you come to Anandvan, you will never find a picture of my father. He called it a social prison or a voluntary prison. And I am jailer of one of the world's largest social prisons. So, I'm afraid if I had said this, you wouldn't have given me the award. But my work needs millions because my father got all top awards in the world to all his three movements, but I never go to press. I have been receiving awards on his behalf. He was first non-medical man to get highest medical award in the world in 1983, named after legendary Father Damien. But he grew up with Uday Shankarji. He was a direct student of Tagore. he was not a Gandhian, but he was an associate of Gandhi, but he was basically driven by Marx. And my mother was the first on this planet to give them right to sexuality, right to companionship. And I have been there since 1972, give them right to parenthood. So it's not our generation, but second, third generation of everyone is working there. But it never happened in human history that they were walking alone. They decided to walk together. No complacency. They helped the blind, the deaf-mute, the spastics, the accident victims, the rural youths. My father launched the Knit India movement. He said the fellowship of pain has no caste, creed, region, religion, and international frontiers. He started. I was the first doctor to work in where Abhay Bang works, where people were deprived of basic necessities of life, where my younger brother now works. Yes, my father was recipient of Magsaysay Award, and my brother and his wife, there are only one family, there are 3 awards in one family. But let me tell you at the outset again, please don't consider it a family trust. It's a public trust. I have some members, honorable members sitting here. Don't let them down. So I accept humbly award on behalf of my father, my mother, and the ones who lost their life. He would call them soldiers. So head of a land army. They lost the battle but won the war against the disease. We didn't call it yajna. And my father again said that food first. Everybody yearns for food. You don't delegate hunger. You don't delegate thirst. You don't delegate your worship. When you're hungry, you go to your wife, you go to your hotel, you go to your parents, but you don't go to temple when you're hungry. For that he got the Templeton Prize, but there was no news in Indian paper. Just a small anecdote. I was there for 3 days where our Honorable Prime Minister was there in Guildhall and in Queen's Place, Buckingham Palace. I was there. I wear what has been produced by my people. And I'm sure there is no news about it. But I was surprised to see Mr. Modi going there and receiving, the Queen receiving Mr. Modi. But then Prime Minister designate John Major said, "Are you Arab? There is no headgear." The other Deputy Prime Minister said, "Jeffrey said, where are you coming from?" I said, "From India. But my friend Rajiv Gandhi has a dress like this." I said, "It's my protocol that I wear what has been produced by my people." But believe me, there is no market. So there are people from all over India. They are your relations, your fellows, your ancestors who died unsung, unmourned, unwept. So sure, this is the beginning of a pain friendship, not pain. I haven't seen cinema because leprosy patients were not allowed to see cinema, even if they buy a ticket. I have world's first therapeutic theatre launched by His Holiness Dalai Lama. He comes there and stays for 3 days, 2 days, hugs leprosy patients. Dharmasthala Padma Vibhushan Dr. Hegde also was there. Only a fortnight ago we were invited in Delhi. So the first time leprosy patient performed in Sangeet Natya Kala Akademi. So we had several shows. It's a therapeutic theatre. I haven't performed here. We performed in Goa and several places in Maharashtra. I have run Alliance International Eye Hospital. Nobody touched a leprosy patient. Those who couldn't see started Alliance International Hospital. There is nothing to be seen, but I worked with Dr. Swaminathan in 81. I was a member of the SAC, Scientific Advisory Committee to Union Cabinet. He says, what lessons Anandvan has for planning of an Indian village? Why didn't there be smart villages instead of smart cities? Thank you very much. All the best to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, we now come to the second part of this evening's function, namely the 13th Nani Palkhivala Memorial Lecture. When Nani Palkhivala passed away on 11th December 2002, his close associate, Mr. M.R. Pai, was seriously ill and in hospital. But from his sick bed, he sent a note expressing his desire that a trust should be established in Nani's memory. Therefore, some of us, Nani's friends and admirers, established in August 2003 the Nani Palkhivala Memorial Trust with two objectives. First, to preserve Nani's memory, and second, to carry forward the causes to which Nani had devoted his entire life. These objectives are interlinked, and in the furtherance of these objectives, the Trust has taken some major initiatives. There are, of course, these annual memorial lectures. A wing of the Supreme Court Bar Association library bears Nani's name and contains his portrait. The Nani Palkhivala Awards for Civil Liberties and Human Rights have been instituted. There are annual election competitions for law students in various cities, including Mumbai, Pune, Hubli, and Sonepat. There's a trophy donated for the national debate competition at the National Law School in Bangalore. Gold medals have been instituted in 14 law colleges for the students who secure the highest marks in the LLM examination. The Trust has sponsored 3 books: a biography authored by Mr. M.V. Kamath, a study of the major constitutional cases where Nani appeared, authored by Arvind Datar and Soli Sorabji, and a collection of quotations from Nani's speeches and writings, authored by Jignesh Shah. And then a documentary film, Nani the Crusader, has been produced and was screened at last year's memorial lecture, which many of you must have seen. This year, an important new initiative has been taken. As many have noted and commented upon, we are witnessing in the last few months that fringe elements in society are increasingly calling the shots. This is a dangerous trend which needs to be arrested. As has been wisely said, when small men cast long shadows, it is a sign that sunset is near. We believe that the threat of this impending sunset in our social and economic life demands that there should be a greater spread of liberal thought and a greater degree of intellectual debate. While we often remember Nani as a great jurist and the defender of the Constitution, we sometimes forget that he was also the great conscience keeper of the nation, and that through his speeches and his writings, he inspired and educated an entire generation. But his preferred audience was always the youth, and his most profound and inspiring addresses are contained in the convocation addresses he delivered in India and abroad. The brightest minds among the youth reside in the students of the IIMs and the IITs, and if we can reach and educate these students, we can influence the future dominant section of our society. It is with this thought that we have initiated the Nani Palkhivala lecture series. We have on the one hand a panel of very eminent persons in different disciplines who have volunteered to lecture at the IIMs and the IITs, and on the other, a list of the most prominent IIMs and IITs in the country who have agreed to host these lectures. The first lecture in the series was held in October last year, and 2 more have been delivered in January, and 2 more are planned for March. The lectures held so far have been very well received and have generated a lot of debate among the students. We plan to have 6 lectures in the next accounting year within the limits of our budget, and more if we can get some sponsors. While all these activities are important, the marquee event for the Trust remains the memorial lecture. We have been fortunate that persons of great eminence have delivered these lectures, which have been printed in over 500 copies widely distributed. This year is no exception, and our speaker for this year is Dr. Raghuram Rajan, Governor of the Reserve Bank. Dr. Rajan needs no introduction to this audience, or for that matter, to any audience in India or abroad, and I shall not attempt to do so. In any case, if I were to list all his accomplishments, there would be no time left for the lecture. Suffice it to say that he is an economist of world renown, and among his many accomplishments, a few may be noted. He is a member of the Group of 30, a most prestigious private non-profit international body established in 1978 and comprised of very senior representatives of private and public academia. He was one of the few, if not the only major economist who publicly predicted the financial crisis of 2008, and his subsequent book, Fault Lines: How Hidden Fractures Still Threaten the World Economy, won the Financial Times Goldman Sachs Prize for the Best Business Book of 2010. In 2012, we won the Infosys Prize for Economic Sciences. In 2013, he won the Financial Studies Deutsche Bank Prize for Financial Economics. And in 2014, he was named the Central Bank Governor of the Year by Euromoney magazine. It is said that when President Kennedy had a dinner at the White House for the most talented Americans in various disciplines, he started the proceedings by remarking that it was the largest gathering of talent in the White House since the time that Thomas Jefferson dined alone. One can equally well say that the largest gathering of talent in the Reserve Bank takes place when Governor Rajan sits alone in his chamber. I have been privileged to be a member of the RBI board for part of Dr. Rajan's tenure as governor, and have seen him functioning at close quarters. I believe it is wholly appropriate that he should be delivering the Nani Palkhivala Memorial Lecture, because he possesses in abundant measure all those qualities we so much admired in Nani: intellectual brilliance, clarity of mind, fixity of purpose, felicity of language, and above all, a willingness to speak out loud and clear without fear or favor on the issues which vitally affect the nation. We are honored and privileged that Dr. Rajan has accepted our invitation to deliver the 13th Nani Palkhivala Memorial Lecture. The subject he has chosen is strengthening free enterprise in India. Before I request Dr. Rajan to deliver the lecture, I would request Sherin Bharucha to present flowers and a memento to Dr. Rajan. Dr. Rajan.
Thank you, Mr. Maligam, for that introduction that I wish I could take home to my mother. Shri Bansi Mehta, Ms. Barocha, Mr. Maligam, distinguished ladies, gentlemen, and students, friends from the press. I did not have the privilege of meeting Nani Palkhivala, but it's clear that every citizen of India has been affected by his life and his work and owes him a tremendous debt of gratitude. Now, I know you've already heard some of his lifetime achievements over the course of this evening, but let me repeat that he was not only a jurist of the highest caliber, but a tireless champion of constitutional liberties, of human rights and individual rights, of freedom, not just of the individual, but economic freedom. As you know, he fought the Keshavananda Bharati case that established the principle that the Indian Parliament cannot alter the fundamental basic structure of the Constitution. This by itself, as you know, would enshrine him as a founder of modern India. But he did much more. He stood up to the emergency, one of the few voices raised against authoritarianism, when the very character of Indian democracy was in question. And recognizing that political and economic freedom go together, his regular post-budget speech was attended by thousands and listened to by millions in the country. He was a lonely voice against the socialism then practiced in India. He argued that it was a fraud, transferring wealth from the honest rich to the dishonest rich. He championed free enterprise. It bears remembering that he was the chairman of TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, one of the brightest stars of the Indian economy today. No wonder Rajaji once called him God's own gift to India. Towards the end of his life, he did sour a little bit on the Indian experience. In a speech in Australia, when he was dejected by the leak of the IIT entrance exam papers, reflecting in his mind the weakening of yet another once sacrosanct institution, he said, "I don't think India in its entire history of 5,000 years has ever reached a lower level of degradation than it has reached now." But in that speech, he also said that India always seems to find a way of coming out of the morass. I will argue in my talk today that Nani Palkhiwala's optimism about India eventually finding the way is probably more warranted today than his pessimism. Yes, we have our weaknesses and our excesses, but our democracy is self-correcting. And even while some institutions weaken, others come to the fore. And even though little men cast long shadows at sunset, the sun does rise in our country. Indeed, I will argue today, and that's the subject of my talk, that the possibilities for free enterprise in India today are probably better than ever before in its history. Now, I don't have a written talk, so bear with me. I'm going to talk you through my talk. And to start with, let me talk about the two conditions that historically have been thought of as important for free enterprise to flourish in society. I think the two that one could point to are a level playing field with easy entry and exit, And the second is the protection of property rights. I will discuss these two conditions first, and then I'll add two more that I think are important for free enterprise to be politically viable, especially in a poor country like ours, which is number 3, a broad access to the capabilities that allow individuals to function in society, and number 4, a basic safety net. Let me come to these in just a bit, but let me start first with the first condition, which is a level playing field with easy entry and exit. The idea behind Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations was essentially competition leads to efficient outcomes. And competition flourishes best when anyone can enter and compete. The best entity then wins, leading to economy-wide efficiency. But this is not the main, or I would say the only benefit of competition. It's not just that the best entity emerges. It's also that in this kind of structure, we have the best chance of combating social prejudice and social biases. The RBI has a term, paisa bolta hai. Translated into English, money talks. And what better factor in society than money talking, rather than social privilege talking, caste talking, religious background talking? Better that money, which the Romans used to say has no odor. It's better that money talks than these other elements talk. In fact, there's a very nice book by this professor from Wharton talking about Dalit entrepreneurs. It's heartwarming how much improvement can happen in a short time by entrepreneurs who set out and show the way to stand up to make money and to then let that money talk for them. But it's not just empowerment of entrepreneurs. To the extent that money empowers, I think the idea of direct benefit transfers is to give people the ability to use money to have choice amongst different services, to create competition between services, so that you don't just have to go to that single point of delivery, which is monopolistic, which is slow, which sometimes doesn't care for the beneficiary. You don't depend on charity, but you have money power with which you can command the services of anybody, anywhere. That, I think, is empowerment, and to the extent that people can get that empowerment themselves, standing up and competing, I think it creates social momentum and social progress. Now, there are many other virtues of free enterprise other than self-respect, other than efficiency. But let me leave them for the moment and talk about the conditions that are needed to generate this. Now, people, when they think of competition, free enterprise, think of a world without rules. Think of a dog-eat-dog world. That's not true. For markets to work effectively, you need people like me, regulators to enforce the rules of the game. You need the government to set the rules of the game. These are very important. In well-functioning markets, there's an entire apparatus making sure that the market behaves, making sure that contracts are enforced, making sure that cartels aren't formed. So you need this entire government and regulatory structure. But the difficulty throughout history has been the very government regulatory structure that enforces the rules of the game can also bias the rules of the game. Bias the rules of the game to favor some against the others. And that defeats the whole concept of free enterprise in a market, because then you don't have perfect competition or strong competition. You have very biased and limited competition you have the possibility of crony capitalism. Now, this is not just theory. In work that I've done with some people at the World Bank in the past, one of the things which caught our interest was the fact that Italy had a lot of small firms. It had a tremendous number of small firms. And so there's always the notion that small firms are dynamic, small firms are innovative. And so our thought was, well, why doesn't Italy grow faster? What is going wrong in Italy? Lots of small firms. Why isn't it more dynamic? Well, it turns out that first, business regulation is tremendously, there's tremendously more regulation and inspection in Italy than in some other countries. More specifically, the United Kingdom, far less business regulation at the time that we were looking than in Italy. What that meant was, because you had to fill in 50 different forms, you had to get permissions from 20 different authorities in order to create a firm in Italy. When you started a firm, it had to be pretty big to start with, okay? Because the costs of starting a firm were quite high. But because of all this regulation, what happened was you started somewhat bigger, but you didn't grow very fast. You stayed small. In fact, in Italy, some firms stay small because they want to hide from the tax authorities. They want to hide from the regulator. They want to hide from the inspector. Sounds familiar, right? On the other hand, in the UK, because there were much fewer regulations to deal with when you entered, you started smaller. So small firms could afford to incorporate, to start as a firm, because far fewer regulations. But then they grew much faster. And therefore, average firm size in the United Kingdom was significantly higher in our study than average firm size in Italy. And that led, of course, to stronger economic growth. There's a myth that goes around which says that small firms are the job creators in the economy. Well, yes, there's a lot of self-employed people, but the true job creators in the economy are small firms that grow big, not small firms that stay small. And so we need growth in small firms. Yes, we need small firms, but we need growing small firms. We don't need to keep them small. And the only way they grow is in a business environment that facilitates enterprise, that facilitates growth. So how have we done on excessive regulation in India? Well, we've come a far way. Remember the license permit Raj, which we liberalized in a big way in the 1990s. And we've seen it happening across sectors. Most recently in the banking sector, after a decade or more without new banking licenses, over the last year we've given 23 new banking licenses, and 2 banks have already joined, many more will join this year. So the attitude towards entry, towards competition is changing across the economy. We have moved significantly away from the days of the license permit Raj. But in a previous speech, I argued that we had moved from the license permit Raj to the resource Raj. That from control over licenses, there was control over resources. Resources like spectrum, resources like mines, resources that were necessary to do business. And selective allocation of those resources created an uncompetitive playing field. I think we're changing that also. It is very hard to think of any area in the country today where authorities can get away through a non-transparent allocation of resources. Increasingly, our press, our Supreme Court, our CAG, our CVC, all the watchdog institutions we have pick out aberrations in the allocation of resources. They're done far more transparently and in far more competitive fashion than before. So I would argue that the resource Raj has also given way to a much more free and level playing field. And then we had the inspector Raj, where you start a firm and the inspector shows up. So this is where I think the new initiative of the government, Startup India, with the idea of reducing red tape, reducing entry barriers, reducing the Inspector Raj, giving firms a 3-year horizon when no inspector is supposed to show up on your doorstep. I think that gives us hope that we will also bring down the inspectorate. We will continue making it easier for people to do business. This, again, does not mean no regulations. It doesn't mean a dog-eat-dog world. It means the regulations that are necessary. Better regulation, simpler regulation, easy to understand regulation, and well-enforced regulation. Not regulation that lies on the books but nobody enforces, or people take gratification to look the other way, but regulations that are absolutely enforced. And again, this is a direction in which a number of institutions are going, including my own. In the RBI, we're trying to simplify the regulations we have on the books, putting out master sort of regulation manuals, updating them online. This is the aim in the next few months, so that anybody who wants to undertake any particular activity and wants to know what regulates those activities can go up, look for what they are, and move forward. So my belief is we've moved a long way, and even though we're certainly nowhere near perfection, we've come a fair distance. We need to continue along this route in simplifying and easing the process of doing business. But business is not just about government and regulators. It's also about the underlying realities of doing business. And there are some continuing infirmities that we need to remedy in order to make it easy for small young firms to start up. Infrastructure, for example. Large firms can afford big diesel generators. Small firms cannot. So we need to make power more easily available. Large firms can create their own logistic structure. They can create their own access to roads, ports, airports, and so on. We need to make it easier for the small firm, which means tremendous investment in infrastructure over the next few years. Again, this is work in progress. Another place which is one of great difficulty in India is finding space. Where do I put my plant down? Where do I put my workshop down? Because space is so expensive. And again, people who have bought land in the past and are sitting on it have a much better chance of using it than the fresh entrepreneur who wants to buy or rent a piece of land to do his business. Here again, I think one of the great changes that is happening in India is competition between the states, which is creating the possibility of easing access to land. States are trying to lure entrepreneurship by promising the one thing that is in short supply, access to land, and of course the other infrastructure elements, and I think that's a good thing. Most recently in Andhra Pradesh, the Chief Minister has pulled together 33,000 acres, not a small amount, 33,000 acres, working with the farmers, promising them a share in the benefits when the new capital Amravati is developed, but also in the process creating enough space for the kinds of industries and activities that the new city will require. So I think it's feasible, it's something that people are doing, it's something that hopefully with reforms in the Land Acquisition Act or with different states taking different interpretations of it will become much easier. A third element is access to finance. Again and again you hear small firms complaining that they don't have access to finance. And once again, this is something that is weighted against the new, against the untried entrepreneur, somebody who hasn't established a reputation. And once again here, to my mind, things are changing. With new technologies and new institutions, example of new institutions, in one of my papers, we looked at, what is the benefit of small banks? It turns out one of the biggest benefit of small banks is they work with small customers. The small customers find it very hard to get the time of day from a big bank. Often it is because big banks are large, sprawling entities with many branches. The branch manager doesn't really have a lot of authority. Any decision on a reasonable loan has to go up to central office. A lot of banking business is done based on character loans. I shake your hand and see how strong your handshake is. I look into your eyes and see if you look back or you stare into the ground. Those are elements which are very hard to communicate in a report back to head office. So when you make a loan, you make it on the basis of parameters which may not reflect the true level of information you have about a small entrepreneur. A lot of it is about character. Do you trust this guy to do the job, or is he untrustworthy? Hard data is hard to get about small firms, which is why small firms can't really borrow from the big banks. Of course, things are changing with the availability of data, but this is where the small banks come in. We see our regional rural banks doing a lot of rural lending. We see our urban cooperatives doing a lot of lending to small entities. And our hope is the small finance banks that we have created will go out and lend to small entities in a way that currently is not being fulfilled by the larger banks. But there are also technological developments which will help here. For example, the government is in the process of creating a unique firm ID. That unique firm ID, in the same way as Aadhaar, will help us identify firms and who's the promoter, and thereby get a sense of the antecedents of firms. That will allow them to build up credit histories, will allow us to lend to them. One of the most important things about identity is that it gives you collateral up front. What is that collateral? It is the credit associated with your identity. It's yours to lose. If you go out and default on a loan after taking a loan giving your unique ID, you will never get a loan again, because that credit default is associated with your ID. So that collateral, your good name, is something you have to lose, which is why people who have no collateral whatsoever can actually go out and borrow once they have unique, non-falsifiable IDs. And this applies as well to small firms as it applies to individuals. So, to my mind, there is tremendous progress here. One of the things I've said repeatedly that I'm looking forward to is how much information can be generated on the net about, for example, small vendors. A carpet seller in Srinagar selling on the internet. Can that carpet seller establish a reputation for selling good quality carpets? Can the internet marketplace, which sees his sales, then get a sense of how much financing he can get and arrange for the financing, perhaps through a finance company which is tied to that marketplace? Can we make this happen? This will enable a whole new source of reasonable lending based on technology, and I think we already have all the elements in place. We're seeing some of this start up, and of course as a regulator we're also watching it to make sure that we understand it fully. Where we have, so these are still places where we're making improvements. There is still a large place where we have an uneven playing field, and that's on resolution of distress. I said entry was important in a free enterprise system, but exit is also important. Because once the resources are used in a particular way, if they're not being used effectively, it makes sense to take those resources away and give them to somebody else who can use them more effectively, or put them to work somewhere else. For example, in India we have a lot of industrial parks which are full of empty sheds. Those sheds are not empty because we don't have entrepreneurs who need space. They're empty because there's some dead firm which is not allowed to die, which is the living dead. It's not allowed to go out of business. It has a hold over that shed. Can we terminate it for the benefit of all concerned and put in a new entrepreneurial firm into that shed? What we have, unfortunately, in India is a very difficult process of resolving firms, especially large firms. And this then works to the detriment of all. For the large firms, basically the resolution process takes many, many years, which means that trying to get the resources that have been captured by that firm into new, better activities is very difficult. It also means that we have a very uneven playing field between creditors and borrowers. The large borrowers can basically thumb their noses at the creditors, at least till till recently, and the creditors found it very hard to get the money back. Now, paradoxically, studies show this hurts the large borrower. Hurts the large borrower because up front, the creditor, knowing this will happen, charges an enormous interest rate. And I've said this again and again, that in India, one of the biggest problems is the spread between the risk-free rate and the rate that businesses are charged is enormous. It is enormous not because we don't have competition, but because the risks associated with lending are high, because the ability to recover money when a firm goes into distress is very weak. Fortunately, things are changing. Now, the early way we tried to change it was to make laws more draconian. SARFAESI is one of the harder laws that we know about. It worked very effectively against small firms. And you talk to any small business owner, and I get many letters of this kind, they complain about SARFAESI being too effective because they lose their plant, they lose their land when the bank caused loan default. But large owners have found ways around it using the legal system to thwart the process of SARFAESI and its implementation. And so we have a very bad equilibrium where laws are made more and more draconian in order to try and get the large creditor to pay, but the small creditor gets crushed under this load. So we need a better balance. My hope is that the new bankruptcy code which the government is bringing in, and which there's some chance, as I understand, of even being passed in the union budget, but let us wait and see. But that will make an important improvement, especially if the legal apparatus to administer that bankruptcy code comes in quickly. It will make it much easier for the small firm to get credit without being subject to the kind of draconian laws we've had to put in place, and also allow the large firm to get credit. Now there's a way for the lenders to recover that money in bankruptcy court. Couple of other, I think, new developments which are important. One of the concerns in a free market society is the emergence of cartels, the emergence of monopoly. And it is very important for an effective free enterprise system to have a competition authority. And I think over the last few years, we've seen the Competition Commission of India gain in stature and gain in credibility as its awards as it gives more awards. And of course, some of these awards have to survive appeals. We'll see how that process takes place. But fortunately, now we have an institution which is looking at the issue of competition, extremely important for a free enterprise system. Before I go to the next point, which is property rights, let me raise the issue. Why are all these positive changes happening? Why is the political environment tilting towards a more competitive environment, when for many years we were happy with a much more monopolistic or quasi-monopolistic environment? And I would argue the reason is because of young India. The reason is because we have to create millions, tens of millions, crores of jobs every year. Because we need to create those jobs, and because a good job is the best form of inclusion, there is tremendous pressure on the system, on the political system, on the regulatory system to deliver those jobs. And to my mind, it is coming out the right way. This is where democracy works. Through the democratic process is coming out as a move towards easing the way to growth as easing the way towards making it easier to open businesses. The second element of a free enterprise system, I said, was the protection of property rights. And this is pretty obvious. We need the protection of property rights to incentivize activity. After all, if I don't believe that the fruits of my activity will largely accrue back to me, I may not have the incentive to undertake as much effort. Now, broadly, property is protected. Of course, some of you may recognize that there is a tension between the first, free entry and exit, and the protection of property. Sometimes property gives people an advantage which those without property don't have. And what is very important is this advantage doesn't become overwhelming. And that's something to keep in mind. Many countries, property doesn't mean that you don't pay taxes. Moderate and predictable taxes are important. Moderate estate duties may be useful. And to some extent, again here, there's been tremendous improvement over the years. Increasingly, with the attention on taxes, there's a focus on tax administration, better tax administration. Many of you who pay your income taxes must have seen over the last so many years a great improvement, both in the process of filing as well as in the process of refunds. And a lot of technology has gone into that, but technology also means transparency and less of the unnecessary demands on you. Significant automation, therefore, has helped, as well as moves to clean up, to make more transparent. Again, I'm not saying this is perfect. There is a long way to go. But the movement has been positive and in the right direction, including, for example, the great debate on retrospective taxation has allowed us to clarify our thinking on this issue, and certainly the government has stated its position very clearly and the way forward. Now that said, let me also, for the benefit of some of our listeners from abroad, say that sometimes the issues aren't clear-cut in the aspect of taxation. That multinational corporations complain all the time about excessive demands, about excessive taxation, but it is also true that multinational corporations across the world tend to find tax avoidance and sometimes tax evasion as appropriate techniques. And therefore, there is a constant fight between governments and multinational corporations. And occasionally there's government excess, but they're not the only ones who commit excess. Some corporations find that all the intellectual property is manufactured in the Cayman Islands. I haven't seen a lot of smart scientists sitting in the Cayman Islands. So there is an issue there that needs to be addressed. More broadly, this is an area we need global agreements which essentially come out with what are reasonable taxation processes, what is reasonable behavior on the multinational corporation. So I've talked about the two broad, property rights broadly protected. Part of property rights is taxation. If you have property but I tax the property away from you, it's not really property. So I need a moderate level of taxation. I think we have very moderate levels of taxation for the most part in this country. We're moving towards a GST. Our personal taxes are at most 33%. These are not high by any standards. These are very reasonable, and certainly compared to our historical past, where at some point we were paying more than 100% of income when you took everything into account, we have come a long way. So we are certainly much better off today. Let me talk about access to capabilities, and this is very important for a country like ours. Aam Aadmi attaches no value to all this lofty talk about free enterprise if he simply doesn't have the capabilities to participate in that free enterprise economy. If he cannot read properly, if he doesn't have health because he suffered from malnutrition when he was a child, if he doesn't know basic business practice, in that case, all this highfalutin talk means nothing because he simply cannot enter the race. So what is really important in a free enterprise system also is that everybody should be able to enter the race. Now, in today's world, the point of entry is very different than in the world of Adam Smith. In the world of Adam Smith, you probably didn't need an education to become a fairly effective business person. In today's world, you need a basic education. You need to know accounting. You need to know where your markets are. These are all important. And this is where, as a society that wants to focus on free enterprise, that wants public support for free enterprise, we need to make sure that everyone has access to capabilities, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, whether it's insurance, whether it's access to finance. And for this, we need very effective delivery of social programs. Programs need not be given just by the government. It can be given by the private sector. But it's very important that the government ensure that everybody gets access to these programs. Good schools, good hospitals, good insurance. Broadly, what I'm arguing is capitalism doesn't start at age 0. Capitalism starts around age 21, when you have the capacity to compete. We shouldn't put little kids in competition. We shouldn't put little kids in workshops working away. We need to get them the skills to be able to compete, and that is why we need the basic social infrastructure which is provided by the which the government ensures can be provided in order to have an effective free enterprise system. And finally, I would argue we need a safety net. Any free enterprise system has ups and downs. If you don't have a safety net, the way down can be steep indeed. You can fall a long way. And what we need is a safety net focused on individuals, which protects individuals from falling too far, so that they can actually take some risks, so that they can actually feel confident in day-to-day activities, so that they are actually kept off the street and don't rebel to overthrow the system when there is adversity. Okay? So we need a safety net. But it's important that two things happen when we create that safety net. One, that safety net is about individuals, it's not about firms, it's not about institutions. Because the whole purpose of free enterprise is to let the best institution win. Institutions aren't people. Institutions are organization structures, and the best organization may not be the best organization today, may not be the best organization 20 years ago. We need to let organizations compete. And those that fall behind should be taken out through the bankruptcy code and in other ways. Okay? But individuals can't be taken out. Individuals need to survive for another day. So we need individual insurance, individual protection, but not organizational protection. All too often in developing countries, we protect the organization in order to protect the individual and therefore protect inefficiency. We have to move to protecting the individual rather than the organization. But the second aspect for a relatively poor country which is walking its way into middle income is we have to be careful about how much insurance we provide and ensure we have the budgetary capacity for that insurance. All too often, entitlements that look small to begin with grow over time and eventually become unaffordable. This has been the experience of Western Europe. We set up huge entitlement programs in the 60s when they were doing very well, and are now finding some of those are difficult to maintain. It is the experience of the United States. It is the experience of a number of emerging markets where the amounts that are going out in terms of pensions, in terms of health care, now are much bigger than was envisaged when these systems were set up. So the safety net has to be there, has to be under every person, but also has to be what you can afford. Not too much that eventually creates problems in the system. So broadly, I think these are the 4 aspects of free enterprise that we have to focus on. And again, I would state that India has come a long, long way from where it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and certainly 50 years ago. From tiny shops, tiny kirana shops, to large internet marketplaces. The spirit of entrepreneurship is very much alive in India today. Doesn't matter if you don't see huge manufacturing outfits, that will come. But there's a lot of work happening in the services sector, a lot of interesting new enterprises that are being established. And increasingly, graduates from the IITs and the IIMs that Mr. Maligam was talking about want to start businesses or work for startups rather than going to an established, reputable consultancy or a bank. And of course, one of the biggest changes that has happened in our country is doing business is getting much more reputable, as is getting rich. So for the heroes of some of the kids around here, it would be one of the many Bansals that there are in the startup spectrum, rather than... and I think that is right. We should praise the Narayan Murthis, the Nandan Nilekanis, and the Bansals who start new enterprises and create wealth in the nation. But of course, this is all work in progress. We need to do a lot more work to improve the environment so that everyone has a chance. And this is where it's important that business, the established business also change. Having been in North Block but also at the RBI, sometimes you get the feeling the whole objective of these meetings with businesses is for businesses to plead for special dispensations. I think that is changing. I think a number of business organizations are now focusing on frameworks, on the environment, how to improve it, and offering good ideas on how we can move forward. But increasingly, business has to put its weight behind that, how we can move forward to create a free enterprise system which can benefit all, rather than looking for specific benefits at a particular point in time. So let me end by saying, I think in the spirit of what Nani Palkhivala said, India always seems to find a way, perhaps not quickly, perhaps not linearly, but eventually in due course. Thank you.
Before I propose a vote of thanks, I have a pleasant duty to perform. As we have mentioned earlier, we have instituted gold medals in 14 universities. The winner of the gold medal in Mumbai University this year is Shamali Divya Chandra, who we are now informed is present here in the audience. And I would like to request Dr. Rajan to offer to her a memento as a token of our appreciation. It is now my pleasant duty to express our gratitude on behalf of the Trust and all those who are present here. First of all, and the foremost, we are grateful to you, sir, for having accepted our invitation to give a talk to us on how to strengthen or strengthening the free enterprise. I think the very important word in the title of the talk is strengthening. Strengthening free enterprise. I have read somewhere that free enterprise can sometimes come about because of a conviction. Sometimes free enterprise can come about by sheer mishaps. Like, for example, what happened in 91 when we had to mortgage our gold stock for the purpose of raising money to secure what we owed to the rest of the world. I had heard from a friend, a very eminent banker, and he told me this is a Tamil story, so our learned speaker would perhaps recognize it. that there was a village, and in the village there was a well. And a small boy was playing around the well, and by accident he fell inside the well. And he started shouting. So there was another person, a fairly young man, who was walking around. So he knew swimming, so he jumped into the well and he got the boy out. Then the village was very grateful to this adventurous person. So there was a function kept in the evening, and the headman of the village wanted to congratulate him, and then he said, "Would you like to say anything?" He said, "Yes. I have only one question. Who pushed me into the well?" So we're not talking about free enterprise that comes about as a forced reaction. However, I have read somewhere that free enterprise has three separate aspects but all concurrently operating. The first is the formulation. The second is course correction. And the third is execution. Now, insofar as our current times are concerned, on formulation, I think we have a great deal of confidence that free enterprise is something which is regarded. I don't have to remind this audience that Mr. Palkhivala, apart from being a very eminent jurist, was a great champion of free enterprise. He was the president of the Forum of Free Enterprise from 1956 or near about that time. So, to talk about free enterprise as part of the Nani Palkhivala Memorial Lecture is therefore very appropriate. I would like to thank Dr. Rajan for having spared his time and talked to us about enterprise. And I very much liked the reference made by him to small enterprises as compared to larger ones. History of mankind, history of the world economy shows that there are some countries which have done very well by starting small and becoming big. And Japan and Korea are two examples where the firm started at a small level but eventually grew. I think India needs to follow, and that's my personal view, India needs to follow the Korean or the Japanese model of free enterprise, not of a very large size. I would like to thank the organizers, the ACC, which has given us a very substantial endowment, apart from the original endowment, by which this annual lecture is being funded. We are also grateful to Justice Sujata Manohar, who is present here. Thank you, Madam. And Justice Sam Variava, retired judge of both retired judges of the Supreme Court, who unfortunately could not remain present this evening, and Mrs. Sudha Murthy, for being on the panel of judges for our Civil Liberties Award. Thank you very much for sparing time. We appreciate your kindness. We would also like to thank Dr. Vikas Amte for receiving the Nani Palkhivala Civil Liberties Award on behalf of Maharog Seva Samiti in the organizations category. Thank you very much, Dr. Amte, for having accepted the award. Next, we would like to thank Dr. Abhay Bang for receiving in person the Nani Palkhivala Civil Liberties Award in the individuals category. Thank you, Dr. Bang. We would also like to thank Dr. Devkishan Sarda of Nashik for nominating both the award winners. We would like to thank Dr. Harish Badame, CEO and MD of ACC Limited, for sponsoring this lecture. This they have been doing for a number of years, and thank you everyone from ACC for this continuing generosity toward Nani's cause. Thank you. We would also like to thank Mr. K.N. Khushru Santok of NCPA for giving this venue at a generous discount, and the others at NCPA. What can an accountant talk about? And the others at NCPA for providing all the facilities for the function. We would also like to thank the organizations that have joined us in organizing this meeting: Bombay Chartered Accountants Society, Forum of Free Enterprise, and Indian Banks Association. Thank you for your continued support. And last but not the least, without you, the audience, this lecture would not be so worth having it. And we're grateful to you, all of you, for having turned up. And of course, we didn't have to do much. We had in the speaker a person who in the words of someone in my office, is a rock star. Thank you very much for bearing with me in doing this formal vote of thanks. And please do continue to patronize our activities in Nani Palkhivala Memorial Trust when we have our annual lectures. Thank you very much. Sorry. Would you would you please wait for the national anthem?
Jai